My people, we're ready to mount up like an eagle. Stand and fight against evil. A system rigged and deceitful. King, you can hear it when
Welcome to the King Talks podcast, where we're all about truth, community, and discussing the things you care about because we care about you. Of course, I'm your host, Adam Coleman, and we are back in the building with another round of our Table Talk segment, where a group of brothers from the King movement discuss, reflect on, and even debate about topics that our King Talks guests bring to the table. Now, this week, as we look back at the Reverend Conrad Tillard interview, we address the question of what is it that attracts men to the Nation of Islam and what the church can learn from it. King movement president Chris Broussard gives some insight in terms of pushing past the packaging of the Nation of Islam in terms of how they project themselves, and gets into some realities about the nation that many of our listeners may not be familiar with. And from there, we get into how the Christian worldview has been a benefit to society in general, even for those who are non-believers. So get ready, y'all. We've got another solid episode of the King Talks podcast.
my people, we're ready to mount up like an eagle. Stand and fight against evil. A system rigged and deceitful. King, you can hear it when I rhyme. I'm a king, renewed in my mind. I'm a king, I got a different bloodline. I'm a king, jump, I am a king. I'm a king.
We back at it again, y'all. We got this Table Talks. We about to get it in, man. We got a lot to chew on for this episode here. You know, we had some fireworks last time around, you know, so we ain't no telling where this conversation is going to go. But before we get there, let me say what's up to my man, the founder and president of the King movement, Chris Broussard. How you doing there, brother?
I'm great, man. How you doing today?
Hey, man, I can't call it like in the words of my man Cliff Means. You know, I got him over here as well. What's going on, Cliff?
Hey, what's up, young blood? How you feel, man?
Young blood?
Don't you repping Detroit
man.
All wrong, man.
Hey,
All
what's up,
wrong.
young blood? How you feel, man?
Did they say that?
feel?
Did they even say that in Detroit?
Hey,
Yeah, they
that
said
Detroit
it back
thing?
in the 70s.
They say that back in the day, man. But the old
in
heads
the
still talk
70s.
like that. They don't give that up.
You can tell how old somebody is based on the slang they use, man. If somebody calling you young blood, they got to be at least 40, 50 plus or something like that, man. You know. In the last episode, man, we had Conrad Tillard, who just was sharing his story, just from going from Islam to coming to Christ, and it was just so many different dynamics to that story, man. To be honest with you, it was one of those things where honestly I forgot I was even recording a podcast. You know, it was just really fascinating to hear him talk about his life and experiences. And so I'm gonna kind of throw a couple things at you guys. I mean, you have a guy who came up in church. He finds himself inspired by Reverend Jesse Jackson in college, and somehow he winds up in the nation. He's kind of just giving these different details, which I thought were interesting. But one thing I wanted to ask is why do you think the Nation of Islam was able to attract him despite his strong Christian upbringing? And what do you think the church could learn from the ability of the Nation of Islam to attract black men throughout the 90s? I'm gonna throw that at. Let me go with you, Cliff. Let me go with the young blood first, man. I'm gonna go with you first, man.
Yeah, man. I like you was really fascinated. This probably was one of my more favorite King Talks. I just think the breadth, the compass of the things that he covered was so broad. I really found myself identifying with a lot of what he said. I think, he mentioned, he dropped that word matrifocal. I was like, okay.
Matrifocal, yeah, right.
Very intelligent
matrifocal.
brother.
I'm like,
Sure, definitely.
Intelligent brother, you know what I'm saying?
That's one of those words you have to have a PhD to even use that word, I think.
He was kind of subtly just dropping the dime on you, like, yeah, this is what I'm about.
Just to let you know.
Yeah,
right,
respect me. But yeah, he mentioned he grew up in a church where he was raised in the morals, the values of Christianity by his mothers, mainly by women. And then he talked about being inspired by Jesse Jackson in his college days during Jesse Jackson's presidential run. And even though Jesse Jackson was a reverend, I don't think he really made a connection that to be devoted to Christ means to be engaged in the marketplace or to be engaged politically. So even though Jesse Jackson was a reverend, I think he just kind of associated that with politics. And so then going and seeing, Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam, who was very engaged politically, but also held, really had a high moral standard and did a lot of their work out of the mosque. I think he just saw that as like, this is a moral, political movement that I can identify with. And also they gave voice to probably a lot of the anger he was feeling after seeing Jesse Jackson lose the way that he did. So I think that's one of the things that the church didn't do well and hasn't done well in the past, is there's this kind of feeling that we can't give voice to the anger and the resentment or the sentiments of the Black community. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's like this guilt complex we have that we always have to be benevolent and we always have to sort of be forgiving because those are Christian values and Christian morals. But when you look at the Bible, you look at people like Moses and Jesus, they were never afraid to speak truth to power. And I think coming out of the election in 1988 where Jesse had lost, I think he was overwhelmed with this feeling of powerlessness, which is something that Black men often, because of the oppression that we experience, we feel. You know what I'm saying? We feel powerless in some ways. And so you come across a Black man that's not only strong, but he's also intelligent, and he's also giving voice to your anger, and he's also doing it in an eloquent way, without apologizing. And I think probably coming out of that time, he just wanted to, he was inspired by a man that wasn't bending over, so to speak, for white America. He was able to recover some of that power that he felt he had lost. And so, I mean, even to this day, and it's something a lot of Black men feel. My dad talks about it. Every time I talk to my dad today, and my dad's getting old. My dad's like 73, so he's getting a tendency to repeat himself a lot. But every time I talk to him...
Shout out to Pops.
Yeah, shout out to the Pops. Love my Pops, and Pops be listening, so he might get on me next time I talk to him. But he's always getting on Obama. And he mentions the same thing every single time, which is, I cannot believe Obama invited that cop to the White House after he did that to Henry Louis Gates. I mean, why are you always acquiescing? See, a lot of Black men feel like that. Like when they see powerful Black men fail or feel like they have to apologize for being pro-Black, it gives them that sense of powerlessness. So I think that really played a big role in inspiring Conrad.
Yeah, I think those are some great points, Cliff. And it's not just Conrad. I mean, the Nation of Islam is known for attracting, Black men up through the 90s and maybe the early 2000s. It's not as strong as it used to be. But I think the main reason by far that the Nation of Islam has been able to attract Black men in numbers that the Black church, or at least relative numbers, because the Black church, by some estimates, is 80% female. Or at least many Black churches are 80% female. So 4 out of 5 people in the church might be female. If you have a church that's 40% Black men, that's viewed as a strong representation of men. The Nation of Islam, there are, I believe, strongly believe, more men than women by a nice little number. So they have been able to attract men. And I think the main reason is because they are one of the few, if not the only, organization that unabashedly and unashamedly speaks to Black men and addresses Black men and the issues and challenges and insecurities that Black men feel. The church, Black men are included in the group of people that they want to reach. Like, because of the emotionalism of the Black church, that may appeal more to women. There are a lot of people that feel like the Black church is kind of geared toward women. But so that is, reaches out more to women. Black churches in general want to reach all people, and Black men are certainly included in that group, but they are not specifically gone after. And the Nation of Islam goes after black men because their belief, and I actually agree with this, is that if you strengthen the man, then you will strengthen the people. So strengthening black men will lead to a stronger black family, black people, and black community. So they go specifically at black men. And they understand that, look, black men, because of the oppression we've suffered in this country, in a lot of cases, you can feel like you're not a man, especially back in the 50s and 60s, 70s, 80s, more so maybe than today. But you could feel like you're not a man because throughout American history, black men have been really forbidden to do what many would call the three of the major aspects of manhood. One, provide for your family. Obviously, in slavery, black men could not provide for their family because they were slaves. They weren't earning money. And then even after slavery, you look at the menial jobs that black men could have. A lot of, there's been a lot of studies on how the black family, even way back then, was matriarchal. And, a lot of times a woman might have had, she was bringing home most of the money, working maybe as a domestic or something like that. And the black men often couldn't, or the black man's education wasn't equal to the white woman's, so you couldn't protect. Obviously, in slavery, you couldn't protect your woman, your family, because your children could be sold away from you. Your wife could be raped. Wife could be sold away from you. Even again, after slavery, black men and black families were subject to violence at the whim of white people, like the Ku Klux Klan and lynchings and things like that. Malcolm X's own dad, was killed by the Ku Klux Klan. Black men couldn't provide, they couldn't protect. And another aspect of manhood is having some type of stature within your society, some type of say within the way your society is governed. And obviously, black men did not have that. So the Nation of Islam addresses those issues. They understand that those things can make a black man feel inferior. And so what do? They come and they say, not only are you not inferior, but you're superior to white folks. And then they say, not only are you superior, you're God. I mean, seriously, that's the teaching. And Elijah, even though that's wrong, obviously we're not God, and no race is superior over the other, one over the other. But Elijah Muhammad was smart in using reverse psychology. That's what he did. He understood our self-esteem, our racial self-esteem was so low and so battered that he used reverse psychology to try to get it up to snuff. And if you look at in the nation and addressing all those issues, they said, we're going to teach you how to be the head of your household, provide for your woman and your family. We're going to teach you how to protect your family. They teach them martial arts and things like that, the fruit of Islam. They're very militaristic. And then they say, we're going to, at least their doctrine is that we're going to get a separate land, a separate nation by which you can run and you can govern this nation. And that way you'll have the stature that are in your society that all men desire. And if you look at any aspect of American life in which black men are dominant, because the Bible even says that God gave us dominion. He created men to have dominion. You know,
all men, right?
So,
not just black men.
All men, not just black men, but all men. But in this society, we have been denied that as black men, right? For the most part. And so you look at any sector of society where we have dominion, professional sports, football and basketball, black men are inordinately attracted to those sports or the sports in general, but particularly ones where black men are dominant. Hip hop, which display, even though we don't really run the business of hip hop, we certainly run the artistic form of hip hop, and we are presented in our lyrics and all that, and even the gestures, the mannerisms of hip hop, very dominant, powerful. We are attracted to those things because they portray us in that way. And when you see the Nation of Islam, whether it's Louis Farrakhan or the Fruit of Islam, you know, in military fashion and dressed up and uniform and all that stuff, that is very dominant, and that can speak to a lot of the weakness and insecurities that black men feel because of the oppressions that we've suffered in this society. I'll say this, it is not one thing that is not the attraction of black men to the Nation of Islam. It's not about black history, because the Nation of Islam does not teach black history. They teach black mythology. They don't teach African history. They teach that a black scientist named Yaqub created white people 6,000 years ago to oppress and dominate black people for 6,000 years. That's not history. That's mythology. I mean, I remember my brother, and I've studied the Nation of Islam very closely because my brother was in the Nation of Islam for about 8 years. Very devoted. He did security at the Million Man March in 1995 and all that. We used to go back and forth debating. So I studied it a lot. And I remember he had gotten out of the nation by this point, but he came to hear me speak once about blacks in the Bible. I was speaking at a church about blacks in the Bible. And so I talked maybe for 45 minutes to an hour about the black presence in the Bible, what we can learn from blacks in America, in the Bible, and things like that. And afterwards, he came to me and he was like, man, yo, that was dope. Like, I ain't know all that. And I was like, I said, what, you in the Nation of Islam? You didn't know about blacks in the Bible and stuff? He's like, he was like, I didn't know what the words meant, like Cush and, you know, Ham and Mizraim and all the words that I defined that helped you identify blacks in the Bible. He was like, man, we didn't study it. He said, we just said everybody in the Bible was black. You know, we didn't study it. We just said it, you know.
Brother's like, ooh, that feels good.
And that was, again,
it's ran with
that
it.
was,
we ran with it.
But you know what? We might laugh at that, and obviously that's not something you want to do. But whites have done the same thing. Whites, there is no historical evidence whatsoever that Jesus and Moses and the biblical Hebrews were white. In fact, the historical evidence says they were clearly people of color. But they just whitewash, right? They just whitewashed it, the Bible, and made everybody white. The Nation of Islam just made everybody black. And there are a lot of parallels between white supremacist organizations and the Nation of Islam. You know, it's just the nations is in black and the white supremacist organizations are in white. And so, but they don't teach African history. In fact, here's a quote from Malcolm X after he left the Nation of Islam. He said, you cannot read anything that Elijah Muhammad has ever written that's pro-African. He said, I defy you to find one word in his direct writing that's pro-African. You can't find it. And that's a fact. I mean, look at what do the Muslims, the Nation of Islam, the 5%ers who are a spinoff of the Nation of Islam, what do they call the black man? The Asiatic black man.
Yeah.
We ain't Asiatic, we're African. You know, and even there's you can check this out on YouTube. There's a video, I believe it's from 1992, but it might be as late as 95, but I believe it's 92. But Louis Farrakhan is teaching, and he says Elijah Muhammad taught the Nation of Islam that the kinky hair or woolly hair of African people and the big lips or thick lips of that are, you know, a common African feature, and the broad nose, another common African feature. Louis Farrakhan said Elijah Muhammad taught them that those were all disfigurements, that those were results of our disobedience to God, and that because disobedience to God disfigures you internally, it also disfigures you externally. And so our lips, our nose, our hair is all a result of our disobedience to God, and we are disfigured because of it. He actually says that the hair on your head should match the texture of the hair on your eyebrows. Okay,
that's crazy,
your eyebrows are straight, your hair on your head is key. I mean, that is nothing but that's similar to the curse of Ham that white supremacists and white racists used to teach blacks during slavery. So my point is that, I mean, during the 70s, during the Black is Proud, you know, when people wearing afros and beards, Malcolm X got a beard when he left the Nation. The Nation of Islam used to speak against that. They were like, you need to be clean shaven, clean cut. Daniel Moynihan, who wrote the famous Moynihan Report in the 60s on the Negro family, he actually said the Nation of Islam imitates white people. And they do. So my point is just that what really has drawn black people and specifically black men to the Nation of Islam is not that they are Afrocentric or that they teach black history, but it's that they address the issues that the internal issues and insecurities that black men are feeling. They do it with mythology. And mythology can be powerful. I mean, the Mormons, you know, made up a whole mythology about Jesus being in North America, you know, and things like that. So it can be powerful, and you see it's powerful with the Nation of Islam with their men. But that's really, I believe, what almost solely attracts men to the nation. And Louis Farrakhan really looks like a strong black man. He's not afraid to speak against whites. And I think that draws a lot of men who haven't had that type of figure in their life.
Is there a connection? Because I know Fariq Muhammad was very fair-skinned, and then Elijah Muhammad's fair-skinned, and then Malcolm
Farrakhan,
and Lewis.
Malcolm Farrakhan.
It seems like based on what you're saying, there was like this elevation of fair-skinned men and light-skinned.
That's an interesting
That's very interesting
point, because W.D. Farad Muhammad, now the Nation of Islam teaches that I believe his mother was white and that his father was black. But the FBI and you know, they believe he was a white man from Turkey. Wallace D. Ford. Right. He had a lot of aliases. But they believe he was a white man. And when you go to Nation of Islam, like Savior's Day that they celebrate, you'll see a huge picture of W.D. Farad Muhammad on the, you know, behind the stage. He looks like a white man. Now, obviously, there are light-skinned black people. I'm one of them. But he has really straight hair. He has really. So I'm just saying that he could look white and be black.
Of course.
But he's got straight hair and he's very light-skinned. And again, the FBI, who obviously studied him and followed him and ended up arresting him, they say he was a white man. You know,
hey, real talk, Chris. I don't mean to cut you off, man, but you know, and we don't want to lose you here at the King movement. But yo, you could be beasting in the nation, bro. You got the profile, man.
Oh, man. Well, like I said, my brother was in the nation.
You could be in that joint running it, dog. You could be.
But I'll say this about Farrakhan.
That's funny. Okay.
There was I guess when Farrakhan was it Malcolm? I'm not sure. It might have been Malcolm. I'm sorry, it was Malcolm. When Malcolm was emerged as such a great speaker, and became the national representative for Elijah Muhammad, there was another brother, I guess. I want to say Larry X, but I'm not sure. Don't hold me to that. But there was another brother who was, they say, as good of a speaker as Malcolm. And Elijah Muhammad chose Malcolm because he felt like the other brother was dark-skinned. And wow. Elijah Muhammad chose Malcolm because he felt like black people, because of their, you know, inferiority complex or, you know, their love of light skin, that they would be more receptive to Malcolm because he was light skinned instead of this other brother because he was dark skinned. So it's interesting when you really delve into the Nation of Islam and their teachings and their history and all that, you will see that even though they are known as this bastion of black pride and black supremacy, they really are not that. In fact, I mean, they had meetings with the Ku Klux Klan when Malcolm X was in it. There was times when Norman Rockwell, I think is the right name, was a white supremacist. They would be at Nation of Islam rallies, sitting in the front row, in their uniforms and everything, because they both wanted separation. So they
kind of like Marcus Garvey,
Marcus Garvey met with the Ku Klux Klan. They would deal with them like that. But also just African, the Nation of Islam is very stoic and very, like you can't like a lot of times we as African, we want to be emotional. We dance and you know what I mean? Like that's the black church is far more Afrocentric than the Nation of Islam. The black church, we have our own musical forms. The beat is very drum driven,
that's
drum
African
driven beat.
in general.
Yeah, that's African.
That's
and
us.
The dancing, you can do all that in church. The dancing and all that. You go to the mosque, Nation of Islam, you're not going to be doing those African expressions and dancing and singing and all that. In fact, the only form of, I would say, black emotion or blackness that the Nation of Islam lets you release is when they preach. Like Louis Farrakhan preaches, he can let it out in the expressions when he preaches, and they produce a lot of dudes that can preach. I met brothers just the leader of the
Conrad
mosque in Newark,
was a
or the leader of the
firebrand.
mosque in Indianapolis. Yeah, Conrad was a great.
He had bars. Yeah,
they can preach, but that's really their only outlet for blackness.
Black culture,
which is ironic. And in fact, lately, like in 2011, somewhere between 2011 and 2013, Louis Farrakhan, and this is bizarre, and I don't know where it stands right now, but Louis Farrakhan basically partnered with Scientology, the Church of Scientology, and he actually put up so he said that all the leaders in the Nation of Islam had to go through the auditing process that Scientology puts you through. And if you didn't, you could leave the nation. And a lot of people think he did it for money, that he sold out, the nation to get the money from the Church of Scientology. But whatever the case, at Savior's Day that year, I want to say 2013, he had a picture of L. Ron Hubbard up at Savior's Day. And L. Ron Hubbard was, most people believe, a racist. And so, again, if you really delve into it, the Nation of Islam is really not an Afrocentric movement. They are just a movement that speaks through mythology to a lot of the issues that are impacting black men. And that's why they have been such a draw. I'm not sure that they still are.
I agree, man. I mean, I think, you got I'll just be real. I think you got a lot of bored black men in church. You know what I'm saying? I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, and one thing that Conrad mentioned was, when it comes to, black women in the church, allowing black men to have space to come in and be busy and productive. I think that's what men at a base level want to be. They want to be doing something and they want to be effective. Right. And I think that, to your point, Farrakhan, or just really the Nation of Islam more broadly, really gives the impression that you can be that. You can, you can. It's like Jesse. Well, actually, I'm still bars from Jesse Jackson. He says like, "I am somebody." You know what I'm saying? And I think that's actually what the nation projects, and it's almost like in a way, it's like that when you really get down to the meat of what they're actually doing, then it may not really be the case, that you're actually being this productive person that you thought you would, but their packaging is so strong. You know what I'm saying? It's like their packaging gives you this impression. And I think Conrad even talked about it. I mean, he talks about the whole deal where you may have somebody with a basement full of newspapers, the final call, and they out there with the bean pies and whatnot. But if you don't sell them joints, you got to hold on to it. That's on you. And yeah, but if you see brothers out there getting it in, you think that, oh man, I'm going to be, out here doing something. I've got a purpose and I'm being effective out in these streets. Then of course that's going to be attractive. But then when you really get down to it, all of a sudden you feel like, dang, man, it's not really what I thought it was. It would be interesting to really talk to some folks and see, maybe who've been in the nation for quite some time, or maybe your brother can speak to it, Chris. I don't know. This might be a question that you can answer as to, maybe that disenchantment, like once you really get into the nation, you know what I'm saying, realize that that's not quite what it's crazy to be.
That's a straight up fact. I mean, because if you look at the history, most sharp, and because I don't want to disrespect the brothers that are still in it, but most sharp individuals leave the nation. They're in it for a season. The Nation of Islam has been the main conduit to wake up a lot of black people to black consciousness. So you'll see a lot of people in the black conscious movement, whether they're now in the Kemet, whether they're now, into some other form of Afrocentricity. A lot of them first became Afrocentric or pro-black or woke or conscious by hearing Louis Farrakhan speak or by being exposed to the nation. A lot of them went in it. But, I mean, Conrad Tillard, obviously, he came out. Malcolm X, he came out. My brother, he came out. I know I met several other brothers
out of
who
Bali.
are sharp. Who was that?
Tabidi.
Who was that?
Yeah. Anya Bwila,
yeah,
right.
exactly. Yeah,
right.
I mean, a lot of sharp. And one of the reasons is because I think if you go hear Louis Farrakhan speak, and you see the Fruit of Islam and they're at attention and they're looking very sharp and militaristic. You see the men behind Farrakhan and Farrakhan is speaking powerfully. You think everybody in the nation is as powerful as Farrakhan. Mm-hmm. And when you get in it, you see that that's not the case. And then, because, in the 90s or 80s and 90s, they were attracting a lot of college people. That's where my brother joined. He was at Howard University. Conrad, was in college when he joined. He obviously went to Penn, and I think it was at Wellesley. Did he say?
Yeah, he did. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Wellesley and Penn. I mean, he's obviously very intelligent. But what happens is the nation does not, for the really intelligent people, and that could be engineers or could be doctors or could be lawyers, the nation doesn't have anything for you to do. All they really have for you to do is to sell bean pies and sell newspapers on the street. That's it. Or have work at their little store, their little bookstore. And that's one thing. Elijah Muhammad was a brilliant businessman. Like when he was in the 50s and 60s, they had a lot more businesses than they have now. Now you got individual churches that have more businesses than the Nation of Islam almost put together. Louis Farrakhan is a great preacher, but I don't necessarily mean that theologically, or I don't mean it theologically, but I mean in terms of his style of speaking and all that, his presentation. He's a very excellent preacher, but he's not a businessman. He is not fit. They don't have businesses. They had a restaurant in Chicago that opened it maybe 20 years ago. I went there with my brother. My wife and I went with my brother and his wife. It closed there was a big to-do about they opening this big restaurant. I think it was called Salam Restaurant. And it closed within a year. And has been closed. I think it may have reopened once they joined Scientology. So maybe they got money from Scientology. But that's why a lot of sharp brothers. Conrad mentioned that when he joined the nation, he had went that day and he heard a doctor who was brilliant who spoke.
Right.
And I believe, I'm not certain, but that may have been Abdul Alim Muhammad. And Abdul Alim Muhammad was a very sharp brother. He was a doctor, went to Case Western Reserve Medical School, I believe. And I saw him when I went to Howard, one of their meetings with my brother, and he was speaking. He was in the nation for around 50 years. He is now out. My guess is that it has something to do with them partnering with Scientology. But he's now out of the nation. So my point is that my uncle who's a lawyer, who was a judge in Louisiana, he was getting involved with the nation in his 40s. And he was knew Khalid Muhammad has been in his living room, and he was very much, getting involved with the nation, but then he left or never, he left. So most sharp brothers do leave because they don't have, they talk a lot. They sell a lot of wolf tickets, But at the end of the day, they can't provide you with what you need to really be productive. I mean, they rant and rave. My brother used to always jump on me about working for the white man. You working for the white man. You working, but they don't have any jobs to provide for you. And now I meet brothers in the nation all the time that work for white companies. You know, because the nation can't really provide you a most of its members that type of standard of living.
Well, yeah, I think it's I think when you have a worldview that is built in reaction to something, then I think it's hard for such a worldview to really sustain progress over time. I'm saying because once whatever it is, it's reacting to either changes or I'll just stick with that. Changes in some sort of way. Then that whatever worldview that is it either dies off. You know what I'm saying? Because it's not rooted in truth to begin with. You see what I'm saying? Or it's rooted in something that's temporal. Rather than, I'm just even throw it in there. The biblical worldview is grounded in reality. It's how the world works. But when you have a worldview that's grounded in something that's temporal, then ultimately, one way or the other, it has to fade. It either has to fade or change. It's got to do one or the other. You know what I'm saying? I need y'all to meditate on. There's some bars on that somewhere. That just hit me just now. I think I had some bars on that jump.
Said. That's strong. Yeah,
I need an organ right now. I could.
Nah, that was good. That was good. I was with it. But I do think though, I agree with you, Adam, that because it wasn't grounded in truth or rooted in truth, that it's hard for the institution itself to sustain itself. But there were elements within the movement that are more unchanging, like the desire of men, or especially black men, to identify with that masculinity. So you look at a Umar Johnson now. So even though the nation has fallen off, black dudes are still looking to attach themselves to dudes who are unashamedly masculine, who are intelligent. Umar is there's no real, look, let's be real. I mean, his theology or his worldview is probably just as faulty as the nation. But he's educated. He's educated about history. He speaks to the issues like Chris talked about. And he's unashamedly a masculine man. And in a space right now in our culture where masculinity has becoming increasingly associated with misogyny and male privilege, men are really looking for a space to say, hey, like, where is it okay for me to be a man? You know what I'm saying? Like, where is that okay? And men will always be, black men especially, will always be attracted to men who are unapologetically men and are intelligent. And those are the elements that, and woke, and also woke. I mean, again, going back to what I said earlier, not taking that whole Negro spiritual, woe is me, humble approach. There's a time for humility, but if we're always just praying and sort of not being presenting this image that we always kind of have to be just waiting on the Lord to speak truth to power, brothers ain't waiting around for that. They like, yo, speak truth to power. And when you got cats like Umar doing that and filling the space that really the church is supposed to fill, because that's what Jesus did. Jesus was a strong man who spoke truth to power. Then you're going to continue to have, if it's not the nation, it'll be Umar. If it's not Umar, it'll be the next dude. You know what I'm saying? And so we got to wake up to that in the church.
Yeah,
there's an overlap. Go ahead.
I think that we, as one thing, part of the question was, what can we learn from it as a church? I think, and that's one thing we want to do as the King movement, is address these issues that are pertinent to black men through Christ and through biblical teaching, but address those issues specifically and not be ashamed that, yes, we are going after black men. We want all men, but we are going to, even if we have all men of all races in our membership, we will address these issues that are peculiar because of our unique history in this country and even our unique contemporary situation. We're going to address these issues that are pertinent to black men. And I'll say this about, one thing I would say, because Martin Luther King, it's interesting because most people, when they think of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, they'll think Malcolm was the stronger one. you know, that Martin was more meek and humble and, you know, beggarly and or begging, and Malcolm was the strong, you know, speak truth to power and so on and so forth. But if you really look at the history, and Malcolm X certainly was a strong individual, but Martin Luther King went into the White House and spoke truth to power. He went and met with Lyndon Johnson, the president, most powerful man in the world, and told him, you need to do this. You need to do that. And if you don't, we will march. Now, Malcolm did his away, and the nation in general, they are away from the system. They're on the outside. And it's easier to stand on the outside and yell about what's not right and yell about what should be done and all this. I think it's tougher to stand in someone's face, especially someone who has more power than you, and tell them we need this done, especially to tell them in a diplomatic way, but not backing up, but tell them in a way that is going to get it done. You know, and so I think
they didn't want to deal with Malcolm.
It's harder to work, huh?
They didn't really want to talk to Malcolm though, because they didn't think that he was diplomatic, so they didn't really want to bring him to the table. You know what I'm saying?
Well, but that I mean, to get things done,
facts. I agree.
Malcolm spoke a lot that helped black people. Well, he wasn't the first to address a lot of these issues. I mean, David Walker addressed them in his appeal during slavery. Frederick Douglass talked about these things. Marcus Garvey, obviously. Right. Bishop Henry McNeil Turner of the AME Church, Richard Allen. A lot of people had talked about some of those before. But Malcolm certainly gave voice to a lot of the psychological damage that black people faced. You know, he made us feel good about ourselves psychologically. But when you look at what things were actually done, who got laws changed, who got, the real legislative stuff done, it was the church. And we take that for granted. But if we really, again, I'm not saying Malcolm X didn't do anything, because he did. But if you look at who really made more of the concrete changes that black people have benefited from in this society, it was Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement.
Well, I would add into, I think that one of the, I don't know if I can say the biggest problems. Well, I'll go ahead and say, I think one of the biggest problems in the African American community is we don't have an appreciation, like for the person who feels more naturally inclined to be that, what is stereotypically thought of as like the Martin Luther King type, the enduring and, patient and so on and so forth. Some people are just more inclined towards that. I think sometimes those people don't have an appreciation for the Malcolm X type. And then and vice versa, I think you have the people who are on the Malcolm X side don't have an appreciation for the Martin Luther King. But in Jesus, I think what you actually have is the perfection of both. You see what I'm saying? I think you have the perfection of both. You have Malcolm with patience. You know what I'm saying? And then you have, Martin with tenacity and with that, grit. And I'm not even saying that Martin didn't have it. I mean, because I agree with what you're saying too, Chris. I think sometimes he's kind of he's kind of given like this candy wrap version of Martin Luther King that I don't think is really based in reality. But I guess my point is, I mean, in the same way, again, I think Cliff, you said that line in the Lamb. I mean, he endured the cross, but don't get it twisted. You know what I'm saying? That's not the end of the story. When he come back, you're dealing with the other side. You know what I'm saying? That's the side, where he really start.
And he gave cats the business while he was here too.
Yeah, I was
agreed.
And Malcolm and Martin were moving in each other's direction toward the end. Yeah. I mean, they were both. Right. Malcolm was coming back.
They probably would have really worked together. Yeah.
And I think as a matter of discipleship, right? As a matter of discipleship, the church has to equip believers in such a way that we can be, that amalgamation of both, the perfected,
I agree,
version of both.
I agree.
You see what I'm saying?
Because Jesus, point. I mean, he did speak truth to power. I mean, he constantly was going at it with the Pharisees and the scribes.
Sure.
And then he was relatable, just like we think of the Nation of Islam and Malcolm being in the hood, reaching the downtrodden and the brothers on the streets. That's where Jesus was. Yes. He was in the streets, if you will, reaching those people. And of course, remember when he went into the temple and he threw out the money changers? He had a whip with him. So there we have a very much of a misconception that Jesus was just this weak, flaccid type dude. And when you really read the Bible, you see that he was incredibly strong. I think that's a great point, Adam, about him being the amalgamation of the best of Malcolm and Martin. And you're right. I mean, we black men in the church of all races, but particularly black men, we need to project a strong image and not fake it. But if you're really being Christ-like and if you're really being biblical, that is what you will be. You will be fearless. I mean, the Bible talks about we should not have any fear at all other than God, and so if we project it, my brother, again, I told you we used to debate all the time when he was in the nation. And after he had been in for about a year or two, we just going back and forth, debating. And he was like, man, you know why I joined the nation, man? He said, cause I had witnessed to him first. And he started going to the Christian Bible studies on campus. And, he was, by all outward appearances, he was quote unquote saved, and at the same time, he started going to the Muslim, what they call power studies. Even that is stronger, right? The power studies.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
He started going to those.
Power
and
Rangers.
he told me, he said, man, you know why I joined the nation and didn't join the church? He said, because the men in the mosque looked more like the men I read about in the Bible than the men I saw in church. And he went to some churches. And so that was, they projected that, like, the men you read about in the Bible, Moses, Abraham, Jesus, Paul, Peter, Daniel, David, I mean, so on and so forth. They are strong men.
Right.
They are men of God, unabashed, unashamed, fearless, but that's not the image that Christian men have. Mm-hmm. We have it's like the women are running the church and the women are the strong ones. And that's totally reversed from, not that women can't be strong, but that's reversed from what the Bible says. Yeah, right. But when you think of the nation, even though it may not be true, when you think the image that men in the Nation of Islam have is of strong men, and they associate like godliness with strength. Like it ain't, they're not, and again, a lot of it's a facade, but they do project that image. I was talking to a Christian brother years ago, and he was saying, like, the thing about the nation, like, they don't apologize for trying to live right. They don't apologize for trying to live righteous. Like, if they come across you and you not in the nation and you a fornicator, you a womanizer, they not going to be like, oh, you the man. They going to be like, yo, brother, what's wrong with you? You don't know who you are. You know what I mean? Like, right. They're not going to back up from living a clean life. And too many Christians are ashamed or apologetic or secretive about trying to live for God and be proud about the fact that you don't cheat on your wife. Be proud about the fact that you don't get drunk. Be proud about the fact that you don't fornicate. That's how Jesus was. Jesus wasn't ashamed of that. Paul wasn't ashamed of that. Afraid to say it in front of your boys. No, and that's one thing the nation does. They, for lack of a better term, in modern day parlance, or at least a few years ago, they come with swag.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
That's a few years ago. We'll let you slide.
Yeah, they're right.
So,
A few years ago.
You prefaced it,
But
so
they
we'll
come
let you
with a
slide.
righteous
Like you tell me, don't step back into the 70s. Don't try to come up to our time, bro. Know your lane. Stay in your lane, as LeVar said.
What's the word?
Fellas,
What's the modern word for that? What's the modern day term
I don't know, but I know it's not swag. And on that note, we're going to have to pause it right there for right now. But be sure to ride with us on the next episode of King Talks, in which we get into part 2 of this Table Talks discussion. Now, in the meantime, make sure you slide over to iTunes and subscribe to the King Talks podcast. Give us those 5 stars and leave a comment. King Talks podcast is also available on SoundCloud, so you can subscribe to us there as well. If you're interested in learning more about the King Movement, then you'll certainly want to visit us at kingmovement.com, where you can join our online community with no commitment and at no cost to you. To all of our listeners out there, thanks for joining us, and as always, strong in the Lord.
Yeah. I brought the kings with me on this one. It's a movement. Yeah. I had a dream. I saw black slaves in 2017, pulling the big king with a crown in the middle, looking like tug of war. I guess they forgot the inheritance of the Lord, dying over streets when God gave him the earth. It's all in the Bible, just do your research. White man's religion, that's just fake news. The cross hit Africa for Europe even knew. This ain't black versus white, this is dark versus light. But racism might distract you from the Christ on sight. So here